Democrats Greater Tucson, we present one of the two candidates that'll be running in LD17. LD17 is a crucial legislative district for us here in Southern Arizona and the whole state of Arizona, so that we can capture one or both the houses. So Kevin was born and raised in Tucson at the base of the Catalina Mountains. He attended public elementary and middle school in northeastern Tucson, then followed family tradition to attend Sal Point High School. After graduation, he moved to Rhode Island to attend Brown University, where he graduated magna cum laude with a degree in economics. Following college, he served as a fifth grade public school teacher in the east side of San Jose, California, interned for Representative Gabby Giffords, taking in constituent communication in Congress, worked as an English language educator in Aguas Calientes, Mexico, on a Fulbright scholarship, and helped former Governor Tim Kaine's campaign for Senate in Virginia. After his time out of state, Kevin moved back home to Southern Arizona, where he became the general manager of a local retail business. Then he joined family firm Volk Company as a real estate agent, focused on bringing people together for win-win deals for small businesses. Now Kevin is dedicated to development and redevelopment of commercial and housing properties, and has founded a small business to create affordable, sustainable, prefabricated housing units from a manufacturing facility in Tucson. Kevin is passionate about learning about the issues that affect Arizonans and interacting with experts to help come up with solutions. He is a graduate of Greater Tucson Leadership and was selected as one of the Southern Arizona recipients of the prestigious Flynn Brown Fellowship for Civic Leadership in Arizona. In 2022, he received the inaugural Business Chamber for Early Education Award from United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona. Let's give a warm Democrats of Greater Tucson welcome to Kevin Volk. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. That's a good overview of my background. I am a Tucson native, born and raised. So I've grown up in this community in kind of the middle of Legislative District 17, just outside, but very similar community to the communities that make up this district, which runs, as many of you know, from Vail and Rita Ranch to East Tucson, Tanque Verde Valley, Town of Catalina, Oro Valley, and Marana and Picture Rocks. So born and raised in Tucson, went to elementary school and middle school in fully funded public education system, and got to see just what it looks like when the public education system has all the resources it needs. Had an incredible time there, and that's where I fell in love with learning and with school and with the power of education. My family's been in Tucson for a while, and my dad and his 7 brothers and sisters had all gone to South Point and established a tradition, so followed them over to South Point High School. Then wanted to have some different experiences and went out of state for college and had various experiences in different parts of the country and the world. The most formative of which was being a public school teacher at the 5th grade level in a Title I school district in East San Jose, California. And there I got to just confirm the incredible promise of our kids and how limitless their potential is. The fact that no matter what their backgrounds, they come to us ready to learn and ready to become great people. And it's really a question of what are we going to do as adults to facilitate what their future opportunities are. And seeing that up close, I got to see the other side of education when it isn't fully funded and when there are obstacles and when there are challenges in the family life and when the public educational system is not up to par and cannot ensure that kids have access to excellent educational opportunities, including things like art and music and sports and extracurriculars and other ways to engage learners. So education for me is the number one issue and always will be, because if we get education right, everything else gets a lot easier. Went to Mexico to further my involvement in education and got a perspective on different system and how lucky we are in the United States of America. We've got not only a great host of economic opportunities, but we have a system, a strong democratic system where people's voices do really matter. And then of course, getting to know folks in Mexico and putting a human face on the people that all too often are talked about as others and used for political points. Then I worked on former Governor Tim Kaine's campaign for Senate in Virginia. This was in 2012. For this crowd, you may be familiar. That was a battleground state back in 2012. Virginia had been reliably Republican, very strong red, and had recently had some statewide Democrats be elected, and was beginning to come around to the idea that, hey, maybe Democrats can do a really good job too. Mark Warner was the governor, and then Tim Kaine followed him as governor, and really showed the way in terms of Democrats' priorities in government being focused on the middle class and working families, in addition to being very, very serious about government in general. So that was a fascinating campaign. It was after Citizens United, the 2010 ruling that opened up outside and dark money. So the number one target of outside money in that election was Barack Obama, of course. Number two was Tim Kaine, and number three was Mitt Romney. So that became a marquee race and really instructive to me for what it looks like when a state goes from being reliably red to more of a purple competitive environment, which of course is where we find ourselves. Finally came back to Tucson, like many of us who grow up in Tucson and leave do, and was happy to be back home working in first in a small business as a general manager, and then working with a lot of small businesses in my capacity as a commercial real estate agent, and working with small businesses who are looking for space, small and medium-sized businesses, and then also property owners with vacant space, trying to make those connections. And what I got from that role was really firsthand experience on what it looks like to put deals together, and deals that might start off and you think these are adversarial relationships, between a tenant and a landlord or a buyer and a seller. But ultimately, if you're working in good faith, there is a way to put deals together that are win-win deals for both sides. And I just could not think of a stronger contrast between what I saw in that capacity and what we see going on at the state legislature. I became very concerned with housing affordability in probably 2017 and started investing in rundown properties to rehabilitate them, to rent them out at affordable rates. Affordable meaning lining up with HUD's guidance on fair market rents, and did that when those opportunities were available. But then when they weren't available, thought, how else are we going to contribute to this housing shortage and went down the direction of prefabricated or manufactured housing. Specifically, we're getting our prototype built of a used shipping container and turning it into a studio residential unit as either an accessory dwelling unit or something that could be used for transitional housing or other low income housing applications. So that's been something I've been passionate about, and unfortunately was unsurprised, but sad to see it grow from back what I saw it as a crisis to now a full blown crisis, supercharged by some of the market forces we've seen. That all brings me to this race. I did not expect to be a candidate in this race, even as recently as a few months ago. But like you, I've been so frustrated seeing what's been going on at the state legislature, even over the past number of years. I'm a proud born and raised Arizonan. I've lived in different places, but I've always been proud of that. At the same time, we know there have been times when folks have made Arizona the punchline in the national conversation for extremism and embarrassing behavior. And I've always been frustrated with it, and it feels like it's reaching a fever pitch of unseriousness about government. And nowhere is that more clear than the news we're seeing about the completely self-inflicted budget shortfall that we're seeing. As a someone coming from the business community, it is unconscionable that we are going from a $2 billion surplus to over $1 billion in deficit by the end of fiscal year 2025. So that there's so many dynamics in this race, and I want to turn it over to questions soon. But the when I started thinking about this race, I thought about just the stakes that we're looking at. And again, I think the budget picture puts some metrics on it, but of course we know there's so much more. One of the crucially important stakes that has come into very, very sharp relief is reproductive freedom. I want to recognize today, January 22nd, as the 2024 as the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And that has been settled law for almost as much time, and that has been ripped out of the national history by an activist Supreme Court. And now that puts all sorts of Arizonans in a very precarious, uncertain position. We need to enshrine reproductive freedom into the Arizona Constitution, but we also need to back it up with a legislature that is not going to use that as an opportunity to continue to litigate and waste time. I mean, we've seen far too often, especially in the past couple of years, that this state leadership under the Republicans has used their positions to relitigate and attack and drag things into the public that have already been settled, whether it's spurious lawsuits or bad faith lawsuits. So I think we need not only to enshrine that right into the Constitution of Arizona, but we also need to back that up with a state legislature that's going to be supportive of it. We need to protect public education. I am a firm believer in the fundamental promise that every kid deserves excellent opportunities all throughout their lives. That is what we owe every kid, no matter where they're born, no matter what they look like, no matter where they're from. That is what we owe them. And we cannot do that with 49th in the country per pupil spending. We cannot do that with a massive and growing teacher shortage and crisis. And we cannot do that without fundamentally sound resources and sufficient resources. And we cannot do that when there's a culture of attacking public education and public educators. Finally, there's the water crisis that's staring us dead in the face. Governor Hobbs has made it a point to be transparent with us as the people of Arizona, and that's that I think is the right thing to do. We need to know. And what we're learning is that while we have been leaders here in Southern Arizona, that is not where the rest of the state is. We need to take what we've done in Southern Arizona and take it to the rest of the state, because if we do not figure this out, we will no longer be able to live the way we have been, whether you're born and raised here like I was, or whether you've moved here to be in Arizona like so many people. This is something we need to figure out right now. And then when I look at our current incumbents, there doesn't seem to be as serious a focus on solving these issues, to put it mildly. So it's not just that they're not representative of the district, which politically seems pretty evenly divided when you look at the first election since the redistricting 2022. It's not only that they're out of touch with where the direct district is politically, they're represent an extreme side of the Republican Party, but it's really about their fundamental seeming lack of interest in solving problems. It's performative, it's political, it's divisive, and I think that that encapsulates so much of what's wrong with our political process and our system these days. So when I looked at all of those factors, I decided to become a candidate because I feel like this is the area of greatest impact that I can have on an individual basis in turning one of these seats from a Republican to a Democrat and bringing pragmatic, common sense, solutions focused leadership to the Arizona State Legislature, which I think it badly needs. So I'm excited to be in this position. It's new to me, but I'm all in. I'm excited to be here with all of you and continue the conversation.
Well, Barbara Warren, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you talk about water issues. That's very important. It's very critical for Arizona. And I also like to hear what you want to do about and what you think about we need to do about environmental issues, climate issues in our communities, our state, and globally, and state and nationally and globally, of course, too. But we have a lot to do in Arizona. So what would you work on? What would you support?
Hi, Barb. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. So water is water is the most pressing one that we can all recognize is absolutely critical in Arizona. There's been a lot of talk about augmentation. I think augmentation is part of the strategy, but to me, conservation is the first place to go in terms of high return on investment, things that we can do immediately to save water and to mitigate the crisis. And that's really what I view as the Southern Arizona mindset that I would want to bring to the state capitol. We do conservation very well. We do water management very well. And it's time to bring that to the state level. On the climate, part of the reason we love living in Arizona or have chosen to come to Arizona is our beautiful desert climate. And that is, of course, in jeopardy. I do believe in climate change, and I believe that we need to be very strategic about planning for future wildfires, future extreme storm events. We're relatively insulated from some of the worst natural disasters here in Arizona, but we have to tackle the wildfire threat head on. And that's something that there hasn't been a serious focus on in the Republican-led state legislature. And then on energy, we have, as we all know, the potential to be the leader in solar and other renewable energies in the country. And that mantle is available for the taking. So I want to see us pursue solar and renewable energies. And I am not in favor of let's call it what it is. What some on the other side are doing is saying that they want to ban or prevent us from using what in many cases is the least affordable type of energy production. So in my mind, that not only goes against what we know about combating climate change and about preserving clean air and clean water, but it also flies in the face of what's affordable for Arizonans from a cost of living perspective, which is also crucial in this environment of high living costs. So there's so many things, but those are kind of the broad strokes on water and energy as it relates to preserving our beautiful climate and desert landscape that we have here in Arizona.
Okay, Larry Bodine has a question.
Hi, Larry.
Hello, Kevin. I say hello from your neighboring district, LD18. I'm the chair, and I just want to express how strongly I support you as well as our PCs and volunteers. I'm really glad that you're running for office. What is your game plan to get elected? You're in a Republican-leaning district, and how can we support you?
Well, that's a great question. And I didn't coordinate with Larry beforehand. But it has been so heartening to see the teamwork and the unity and frankly the focus on LD17 and then LD16, which comprises Northwest Tucson and the I-10 corridor and Casa Grande and Maricopa. So I want to give a shout out to LD16. But it's been so heartening as someone who really feels strongly like you all do that we need more Democrats to see how the whole communities come together. My district, LD17, Chair Larry Wagner and Sue Anderson and Nancy Burton are vice chairs. The leadership is incredible. The organization and energy is incredible. But we also, as you heard from Larry, have explicit commitments of support from LD18, our neighbors, and then other districts. And that is going to be crucial. This is an uphill race. Make no mistake, this district was designed for Democrats to have zero chance. And most of you know, if you go on the Independent Redistricting Commission website and look at the map, it says this district is quote unquote out of competitive range. The Republicans were done drawing this district last year and they thought they could forget about it for 10 years. And it is our job to bring the fight here and then to win, and not only to score a victory and in a way that impacts the state leadership, but also to score a victory against gerrymandering. So I would say the first part is that unity and commitment from Democrats. The more Democrats we can turn out, the fewer folks we need to turn out from independent and Republican registration. We all know this. That's the best way to get the numbers up. That said, this is going to be a campaign that is geared toward building a coalition. And it's going to be a coalition based off of shared values that most Arizonans have. Shared values on managing a responsible budget, shared values on enshrining the right to reproductive freedom into law, shared values based off of supporting public education where 90% of Arizona's kids go for school. So it's going to be focused on shared values. We're going to be focused on November, and I'm going to be knocking on a targeted goal of 10,000 doors personally, in addition to having a really robust goal for our field work for LD17 and our supportive Democrats here in Southern Arizona. So it's going to be an all-out field effort, all about grassroots, one-on-one conversations. I've been out the past weekends, and I can say there is a real appetite for getting back to business, getting back to serious governance, focusing on solutions, taking the temperature down. People are sick of the divisiveness. They are sick of this, the narrowest majority that they've ever seen in the state legislature on the Republican side being wielded as if it's some sort of massive public mandate and being wielded against ideas and policies with popular support against initiatives that have been passed by the voters. So there's some real frustration there, rightfully so. And so we're gonna have to take the case to independents and Republicans. But from what I've seen, they're being receptive. That said, everyone on this call, if you're in Southern Arizona, after the primary season, I'd ask you to see what you can do to help on the canvassing side and the voter contact side, either for Legislative District 17 or for Legislative District 16, because that's going to be a tough race as well.
All right.
Okay, Kat Stratford has a question.
Again.
Hey, Kevin. So first, I just wanted to premise that I'm also so glad you're running. You can definitely count on me for some of those canvassing efforts. My question for you is regarding housing. As you know, I work in housing and I work with the homeless community. And I'm interested to know, right now, the median price for renting a modest 2-bedroom apartment is $13.75 a month, which is more than many families can afford, especially single parent families with kids. And I'm getting multiple calls every day. Somebody has told people that I have housing vouchers. They don't exist. The situation is untenable. And as you said in your opening remarks, this has become a full-blown emergency. And so I'm wondering, what plans do you have on the legislative end to sort of manage the crazy amounts of eviction, the crazy amounts of homelessness that we're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, and there's a clear contrast in the priorities at the state level. We have an interesting situation, as we all know, with a Democratic governor, but both of the state legislative chambers are controlled by Republicans. So we have been able to see what Governor Hobbs prioritizes, and we saw that very clearly in the $150 million allocated to the State Housing Trust Fund. And we saw that very clearly with the $60 million allocated to specifically for homelessness relief. So those are Democratic priorities. If you'll notice, when those funds were voted on, it was not my district gets a certain amount, your district gets a certain amount. It was not pork barrel spending. It was general spending to affect and help everyone in the entire state based off of the Arizona Department of Housing application process. So that's what Democrats want to do. And that was possible because we had surplus monies. Those are Democratic priorities. So at the baseline level, it is getting more Democrats in the state legislature. So those governor's priorities, because she comes from a social work background, as you and folks on this call know, she gets it. This is a crucial area. So that's kind of number one, is we need a state legislature that's going to back her up on housing. To me, it's really about supply, and that's what I focused on in my personal life. As a private citizen, we need to focus on making it as affordable as possible to develop housing that's going to be affordable to people from a variety of backgrounds, not just luxury apartment rentals, which we've seen that's almost the only thing that's been developed in Southern Arizona. But we really need to come up with a full package to incentivize development that can be affordable. And that comes from streamlining the process for affordable housing. We've seen the city of Tucson take some leadership in different ways, but there's a lot that the state can do in support of that. And then there's also coming from the experience of actually having taken some properties and redeveloped them for the purpose of providing housing for low-income folks at an affordable level, and folks who were formerly unhoused. There are creative things that happen in the for-profit development community creative financing strategies that we can tap into. And that can include using the lower interest rates, the tax-free interest rates that state of Arizona has access to through the Arizona IDA. So there are a number of kind of wonky and financing and business related things we can do to incentivize development and also make the dollars that we do allocate to housing go farther than they're currently going. So those are just a couple. I could talk all day though, and maybe we can circle back.
Awesome. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thanks.
Okay, Lucy Messing has a question for you.
Hi, Kevin. How's
Hi,
it going?
Lucy.
Hi,
Good. How are you?
I'm great. So I'm going to ask you, I know that for AEA, they're going to be doing their endorsements in April, but I'm hoping that they've reached out to you and that you'll be interviewing. So, and I have an in with AEA, so we're looking at pushing forward that. But what about other endorsements, labor unions, people that can really help you with your ground game and finances?
Yeah, we're in conversations. It's still, I just got a campaign manager as of this Thursday. So we're still kind of settling in, but I've already had some conversations with folks on the labor side, and just recently, also on Thursday, had a conversation with folks up in Phoenix at AEA. So
Okay.
I'm actually a former member of an affiliate of NEA. So that's obviously a former public school teacher. So that's a natural fit. And it's great to hear about just how effective educators and other folks in labor organizations are as advocates and door knockers. When you become a candidate and you're the one doing the asking for volunteer helping instead of being the one providing the volunteering on the canvassing side, you realize, hey, this is a pretty big ask. And so every single person who's willing to answer that call and say, yes, I'm willing to knock doors for you is invaluable. So we've started the formal engagement with some folks on the labor side, and then we'll continue to do that. And frankly, I think that will be the most powerful contribution, is the door knocking and the organizational support, because this race, we all know there's going to be a big presidential race at the top of the ticket. We know it's going to be a pretty raucous Senate race, just by the likely Republican nominee alone. And I really believe that there's going to be so much advertising. We have to play there. We have to play in political advertising. But I really think where we have a chance to break through, and especially talk to voters who aren't already registered as Democrats, who are registered as independents or Republicans, and make the case, is on the ground, one-on-one conversations as much as possible. So I think the help that AEA and other labor organizations can provide in that capacity is my top focus. And we're going to continue to have those conversations and formalize our reach out now that we've got more of a campaign infrastructure in place. Thanks, Lucy.
Okay. Lillian Fox has a question.
On the rent, we had a Democrat who spoke, who's going to put a bill in the state legislature to try to do something about rents. One of the issues on rents is when people quote what the rent is for an apartment, that's not what you're going to pay every month. There are so many additional charges that you don't find out about until you actually get the contract in front of you. And so it's really a bad situation. For example, everybody knows you're going to pay for covered parking. If you've got a pet, you're going to pay for a pet, but you're also going to pay fees for security, whatever the heck that is. Sometimes you see charges for insurance. You see charges for pest prevention, just all kinds of crazy things. And these things are not part of your lease. So an apartment complex owner can add these things to your monthly fee anytime they want to. They can increase them anytime they want to. You're obligated to pay them. You can't opt out of them, but they add them all the time. And there's currently one of the Democrats is trying to put a bill before the legislature to do something about rents. But what are you going to do?
Absolutely. So I've spent in my time as a real estate agent focusing on commercial properties. I spent a lot of time negotiating leases on behalf of, in my case, commercial tenants, and absolutely, that's one of the primary goals of that entire conversation is to have a full picture. In that case, you're talking potentially about someone who's taking the leap to open a small business, and it's the first time they've done anything like that. So you're advising them, and part of what your role is to get them information on how much this is going to cost from the perspective of the landlord, what the landlord is going to have the right to charge you and what they're not going to have the right to charge you. So that's actually an issue I'm very intimately familiar with. And to your point, I don't know that you said this directly, but kind of alluded to it. It's actually been more of a practice recently that these separate fees are broken out, as opposed to being included. So there's more separate charges for things like covered parking than there was in the past. And because of that, I'm always in favor of full disclosure, and the idea that all of those costs should be disclosed before there's a commitment. There's obviously going to be rules and regulations that govern apartment complexes and things like that are, when the trash gets picked up, that property owners need to have the ability to change as they change in real life. But on the fee side, I'm absolutely in favor of disclosure and having that information readily available up front.
Okay, Mike, do we have any questions in the chat room?
The first one was, of course, how we're going to win in LD17, and I think Kevin addressed that pretty well. Knocking on 10,000 doors is a really good start. That's just you personally. That's, it comes down to meeting the candidate, having a relationship with those voters in that district, and the best way to do that is to walk that district. So, congratulations for setting that goal. I hope you meet it. The second is from Sue. She wants to know how much funding you've raised thus far, what your planned budget is, and what your fundraising plans are.
Yeah, thanks. I will note that I'm talking about myself personally. LD17, as I mentioned before, this is not even counting the help of Larry and even Kat and other people who have committed to help. But their target universe is about 80,000 people with multiple touches. So it is an ambitious field, grassroots, volunteer-based campaign across the board. But Sue gets to the other part of it, which is the funds and the money. And we all know that in our system, you've got to have the resources to stay in the race. And as I mentioned before, this is not a district that anyone's taking for granted anymore, like last cycle. The Republicans, we've seen with folks like Wendy Rogers, the extent they'll go to support and prop up any Republican, regardless of their ideology, just to preserve their majority in the state legislature. So we've seen they'll go to great lengths and pour in lots of money into a race. I've just turned in what I think is a strong start for the month of December. I filed in mid-November, but really didn't announce until December 3rd, I believe, and turned in a strong report. So I'm very comfortable with that as a baseline. The other thing I'm going to be doing, in addition to knocking doors, is talking to, continuing to talk to my network and also all sorts of Democrats around Southern Arizona, and frankly, even nationally, to talk to them about the importance of flipping this district and winning against this gerrymandering. So I feel confident on the funding side. That said, that's another thing, like the 10,000 doors, where I have a large goal, and that's going to be to raise as much money as we see, really as much money as you see getting raised in state legislative races, just because we expect the Republican opposition to be so strong. So I'm certainly raising funds. I'll take it, $5, $10 at a time. There's a link on my website, kevinvolkaz.com. And then we'll continue, in addition to doing lots of door knocking, have just begun a formal call time for fundraising that I'll be doing throughout the race.
So I have a follow-up that's my own question about that.
Yeah.
Do you have a feeling at this point, or are you still learning? You're a first-time candidate. What the most effective way to spend that money that you're raising is in a legislative race here in Southern Arizona?
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, the most important money is the money that facilitates the canvassing and the door knocking. But that's not the bulk of the money. And we all know that this district is geographically very large, and it also has a number of communities that are inaccessible, meaning that without a lot of careful planning, I'm not going to be able to get into those neighborhoods to canvass at all. And so that's when direct mail comes in. That's probably number one. I'm going to work very carefully with the vendors to try to make sure that the multiple direct mail pieces that we send to people will each be unique and have a value add. Designed the walk card that we're using for our canvassing, and it has a lot of my bio and my priorities. I'm trying to really give folks some information on me, and not just say, hey, vote for me. So we're going to try to continue to have mail pieces and printed media that tries to get a unique look as it comes by. We're also going to be leaning heavily into digital. Part of my strategy is part of how I see this district. There's, especially a couple of years ago, there's no such thing as LD17 as, a cohesive region, right? This was by definition assembled together almost like a Republican's Frankenstein's monster. But it does comprise a number of communities. It comprises the Vale and Southeast community. It comprises the East Side and Tinca Verde Valley. It comprises Oro Valley and Marana. And so what I'm really looking forward to doing, especially in my digital media, but also in printed media, is to talk to issues that are specific to those subregions of the district, those communities that we who live in Tucson and aren't designing districts, we know those to be real communities that are cohesive.
Okay, well, Lillian has her hand up again. Lillian?
This is back to water. I'm glad that you're taking water really seriously. I'm a retired earth science teacher, but one of the things that makes me crazy is I lived in Colorado for a long time, and there's a lot of public information and advertising to the public to let people know how to water grass and how to make effective use of water. We don't do that in Arizona. And at the church where I was the trustee of the chairman, we fired an award-winning landscaping company because we could not persuade them to quit watering our grass 3 times a day. We didn't have much grass. A lot of places have a small amount of grass, and all over Tucson, particularly the apartment complexes, the grass gets watered 3 times a day. What can you do about educating the public about how to make better use of our water?
I think it is about education. I actually remember a number of years ago asking my mom, why do I care so much about water conservation? Because I've been famous in my family for being pretty stringent on it. And she thinks there was a PSA type ad that was directed at kids that I saw, where it showed water coming out of a drain, or water coming out of a faucet, and then less water for a fish to be in. So that she thinks that made the impacts. But regardless, I've been very passionate about water conservation ever since. And I think similar to what inspired me, we need to put more of those very simple messages where we say, this is what we're doing now. This is the trade-off. And we have to draw those lines very clearly. Right now, we have this nebulous idea that maybe there's a water shortage, but none of us is going down into the aquifer. None of us is really visualizing, except when we see pictures of Lake Mead and Lake Powell. None of us can really visualize what it means to our personal life. And so I think, tying that together, and probably the simplest way I can think of is saying, when we choose to not conserve water, we are choosing higher water costs. We are choosing more expensive products. Those costs are helping drive the high cost of living and the high cost of products that we're experiencing. And they're going to result in a huge increase in costs once we get to a crisis point in water. So I think making the case as clearly as possible and investing explicitly in education so that we can get some awareness. So it's not just us who are, those of us who are following the governor's water policy recommendations, but we put it out in a public facing way. But I can, yes, every time I walk by grass being watered in the middle of the day, it just kills me. And alternatively, I drove by a soccer field and it was full of dead grass, and it took me back to all of my childhood memories, because that's what it's like growing up in Southern Arizona. That's what grass looks like sometimes, and it's okay.
What is your campaign manager's name and background?
Oh, Rodrigo Guerrero. He was most recently with Stanford Children. He was an organizer with Mission for Arizona last cycle. He was with Kirsten Engel's campaign, but he's been involved in a variety of different capacities. I think one of his first experiences was as an intern with Tom O'Halloran, if I'm not mistaken. So he's Southern Arizona, U of A, been really active, focuses on especially strong on field, which again, I think is going to be crucial. And so, and just an energetic guy. So really excited to have him.
Right. I'm glad he's a local.
Yes.
Gail would really like to hear your elevator pitch for your campaign. She wants to know that you can quickly get the voter to convert and vote for you.
All right. Thanks, Gail. So my name is Kevin Volk, born and raised in Tucson and grown up here in Southern Arizona. I've seen the state legislature stray from focusing on the things that we care most about. As a former public school teacher, I'm passionate about fully funding and staffing our educational system so that every kid has an opportunity to succeed. I'm passionate about solving our water crisis so that we can continue to live in this place we've chosen to call home on the long term. And I'm passionate about enshrining reproductive rights into the Arizona Constitution. And finally, I'm for governing responsibly, focusing on solutions, and not contributing to the divisiveness of our politics. And for all those reasons, I'm running for your representative of Arizona State Legislature 17.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.
Let's see. We got are you aware of, or are you planning on exploiting any specific vulnerabilities of the incumbents in the House, Jones and Gar? We got a repeat second question in there from Kenneth Minkoff, who you can read that in the chat if you'd like. What's your response to that?
I mean, I wouldn't be in this race if there weren't such clear contrasts. I think those of us on this call know that you can say things like, I want to represent everyone in the district, and that is a clear contrast. You can say things like, I'm focused on the solutions. That is a clear contrast. Argue with independents against Rachel Jones. In terms of what I would highlight about the incumbents, I just highlight that to me, again, it's not so much that the incumbents are on the extreme fringe of the far right, it's really that they seem to be unserious about solving the issues. They're focused on banning books. They've spent a lot of time in our legislative sessions on the 2020 election, looking backwards. And I think we've got real crises that we need to focus on. And I also think we just need people who are wanting to do a serious job, the serious job that is required when we confront these crises and when we are representing everyday Arizonans, and getting back to a place where we can certainly disagree on policy, but we bring down the tone of animosity and divisiveness. And frankly, more than policy, that's what I've seen independents and even Republicans respond to or articulate that they want to see. So that's so I want to run as positive a campaign as possible, but certainly when, you know, for example, Rachel Jones says that she will not pretend that Katie Hobbs is governor. I think if you're serious about doing this job, it's really hard to work with the governor of the state if you don't believe she's the governor of the state. It makes it really hard to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Cory McGar's focus is on getting Joe Biden off of the ballot. And in my mind, that is not a priority that most Arizonans care about or think is worth spending any time on when we've got these real live problems staring us in the face.
Yeah, nor is it possible.
so-
I mean, Secretary
so-
Secretary Adrian Fontes has been very clear that Arizona law specifies that if you're on the ballots in 2 other states, you're on the ballot here in Arizona. It's just not going to happen for either side.
Exactly.
So
And I-
Kevin, this
Go
is
ahead.
Ken. I was the one who put that question in the text. And I just want to say where you wound up is a great answer. You know, having done canvassing, as I'm sure many people have, you don't get a lot of time to get into complex policy issues with people whose doors you knocked on.
Yeah.
So you need some sound bites. And I don't know these, you know, Karen Jones or whatever, what she does. I mean, you know, what she says, but that's very helpful to have that information that
Yep.
she's out there saying stuff like that. I mean, because if we're going to sway people who are not already inclined to vote Democratic, we have to let them know in very succinct terms why the people you're running against are idiots. And those are good pieces of messaging, you know, that it's more than saying they're unserious. It's like, she won't say that Katie Hobbs is the governor. Is that somebody you want to represent you? Because she, you know, because that's not functional. Whatever you may think about the rest of her positions, this is an illustration of what we're dealing with. I can wrap my brain around if I'm in a canvassing situation. That makes it really simple for me.
Great feedback. Thanks, Ken.
Let's see. Oh, by the way, her name is Rachel Jones. She may be a Karen, but her name is
I'm
Rachel.
sorry, Rachel. That's you probably read my mind, Michael, that I was turning her into a Karen.
Yeah. So we have another question. What about the abortion access initiative that is running that is probably going to be on the ballot in 24? What's your position on that, and what impact do you think it'll have on the race?
Oh, I'm in full support of it. I talked about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That's settled law, and this gives certainty in the restoration of fundamental rights that a lot of us have counted on for the previous 50 years. So absolutely, I carry the petition as well. LD17 has a very ambitious goal of getting 50,000 signatures to contribute to the target of 500,000 signatures statewide to get it on the ballot. You know, last cycle, we saw that it helped enthusiasm because it's just a great encapsulation of how out of touch the Republican state legislative leadership is and Republican politicians are from not only the general public, but even their own Republican base. So it's a great example of how their priorities are so different from the priorities of most everyday Arizonans. and it's a fundamental right that we need to enshrine in the Constitution. I think so. I think there will be some continued enthusiasm this year, but what I want to emphasize again is it is not enough to enshrine it in the Constitution. We have to enshrine it into the Constitution and then have a state legislature that's not going to feel like, hey, I can keep on scoring political points by bringing frivolous lawsuits against this. We've seen, I wish that weren't a real concern, but it is a real concern. And so not only do we need folks, including independents and Republicans who support this measure, to vote for the ballot initiative itself, but we also have to remind them, hey, there is a party that is pro-choice and there's a party that is against legal abortions. And you need to make that choice, not only on this part of your ballot on the ballot initiative, but when you're voting for candidates for office, including in the state legislature.
Okay. Well, Mike, anything else for the good of the order?
I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat. If anybody else has a couple last questions they want to throw up. Oh,
Susie
there's Susie.
Anderson. Yes,
Always
Susie,
count on
go
Susie.
ahead with your question.
What are the age demographics in your LD? Are there any young people?
There are some young people. It's similar to it reflects the effort that went into drawing this district, which was to find Republicans. So it is older district on balance, and it is it does skew pretty heavily towards the older age demographics. That said, I think there's an overlap between a lot of the issues most Arizonans care about and the issues that young Arizonans care about. Young Arizonans care about climate change because they're going to have to live with it. And so there's one party that both believes in and cares about doing things to fight climate change. There's only one party that believes that. That's the Democratic Party. They believe in reproductive freedom, and that is top of mind right now for them. That is something we believe in. That's something that the incumbents do not believe in. So I think there's enough overlap in the issues of the day, but it's not a huge portion of this district's demographic makeup.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And Kevin, thank you so much for being with us today. I think you did an awesome job. You're an awesome candidate. I have never seen as many gifts come across the Zoom for a candidate as you did today. So keep up the good work. We're with you 100%.
I appreciate it. And I still not gotten over it, whether it's at a Canvas launch or any other environment, to see so many people on the call and taking time out of their day, to see so many people, how much people care and not only care, but are willing to put in the time and the energy and attention to do something about it. It would be one thing if I were fighting this battle alone, but at every turn, I'm reminded that there's a whole community of Democrats behind this, and it's really heartening, and I just appreciate it.